News continues to trickle out about Manchin's seemingly abrupt ejection, self-ejection from the Build Back Better negotiations. The Biden administration is trying to coax Manchin back into talks. Now, Manchin reportedly went on Fox News on Sunday, ignored a call from the White House, and proceeded to blow up Build Back Better and say he was a no on the entire bill on live television. Now, what was the motivation behind this? I mean, this guy's ego is, we're learning even more and more about Manchin as an individual. It's pretty massive. Reports are now also saying in recent days that Manchin was butthurt over the fact that some of the details of his negotiations with the White House were leaked to the press, which, I don't know, that's just kind of what happens when you're a senator and your vote is defining on this massive piece of legislation.
How about all summer you had a secret agreement with Chuck Schumer that nobody knew about and that didn't get leaked to the press and wasted all of our time? So, like, I don't think you get the benefit of privacy on these matters anymore.
Yeah. This is from the New York Times. When word leaked the next day that Mr. Manchin, this is in the midst of last week's negotiation efforts between the White House and Manchin. When word leaked the next day that Mr. Manchin did not support the child tax credit as written, the cornerstone of the plan and a priority for most Democrats, Mr. Manchin was furious and snapped at Capitol Hill reporters, offering a profane denial that he wanted to remove the child tax credit provision entirely. So Manchin goes, oh, it must have been White House officials that leaked that to the press, throws a tantrum, goes on Fox News, basically like a child tries to get back at the Biden administration for not being tight-lipped about his own policy positions, goes on Fox. Now there's some sort of like vague hope that he can come back to the negotiation table if Biden kisses his ring enough. But like, what's also clear too is that the full details of Manchin's opposition to the child tax credit hadn't even come out yet, and they were way more damning. HuffPost article that came out maybe yesterday, I believe, on what Manchin has been saying about the child tax credit for months at this point. He's been against it, or at least, you know, he says, oh, I'm in favor of one version of it, essentially, which is going to involve work requirements, etc. But he's been bad-mouthing it as like a government handout for months at this point. This is reporting from HuffPost. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, he's been saying it's like it's entitlement.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's going like 90s Bill Clinton, 80s Republican, whatever flavor you want. Publicly, his biggest gripes are about the cost of the bill. But privately, Manchin has told his colleagues that he essentially doesn't trust low-income people to spend government money wisely. In recent months, Manchin has told several of his fellow Democrats that he thought parents would waste monthly child tax credit payments on drugs instead of providing for their children, according to two sources familiar with the senator's comments. Continuing the child tax credit for another year is a core part of the Build Back Better legislation that Democrats had hoped to pass by the end of the year. The policy has already cut child poverty by nearly 30%. Manchin's private comments shocked several senators who saw it as an unfair assault on his own constituents and those struggling to raise children in poverty. Manchin has also told colleagues he believes that Americans would fraudulently use the proposed paid sick leave policy, specifically saying people would feign being sick and go on hunting trips, a source familiar with his comments told HuffPost. Manchin's office declined to comment for the story. Sounds like something you would do. The hunting trip is pretty specific, right? That sounds like, I mean, if I were in the situation, I was getting free money. You know that I wouldn't be truthful or act in good faith because I'm Joe Manchin.
People might get to enjoy themselves. Like, I don't understand what the problem is.
Yeah, okay. They spend the child tax credit money on drugs. Whoop-de-dee. That means they have to spend other money that they possess on raising their children.
Yeah, like what if they spend it on a gas-guzzling Maserati? Like, why? The question I have, though, is, like, why are we well, we're not, but why is... this is a rhetorical question, but why is Biden and the leadership accommodating this freak? Because he's been doing this the entire time. This confrontation should have come way earlier. Somebody talking like this about child tax credit should not be a member of your party. I'm sorry, you got to figure out your way to get your judges passed or whatever. But like, make it, when he floats the idea of being independent, say, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, figure it out, because like this is unacceptable.
Or call his bluff on it. I mean,
yes, I mean exactly. Like you can't. But instead, we've just completely bent to his bad faith negotiation this entire time, and the question is why?
Well,
Why are we doing that?
the answer will infuriate you. This is from the New York Times. Much of the president's optimism has been built on Mr. Biden's belief in the kind of good faith negotiations that he built his career on during 37 years in the Senate. Mm-hmm. One of his favorite lines is to declare that people can trust him because he has given his, quote, word as a Biden to follow through. I'm giving you my middle finger as a Vigeland. Mm-hmm. His exception, according to people familiar with his thinking, was that Mr. Manchin, whom he considers a friend, would adhere to the old rules of that chamber, working towards a solution, even if they disagreed about the details. That's like, oh, your mind is that of a child. Like, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of who you're dealing with.
Well, look, like, I think this is what Biden was, like, kind of ran on doing, right? This sort of nonsense. And the only problem is going to be when it fails, are we going to have a forthright discussion about that it failed? Or are we just going to act like the progressives were too forward in their demands? And, you know, Washington there's tough battles, like David Axelrod says, and you just don't know who's going to win at the end of the day. It's like we tried our hardest, gave it 110%, and we just came out with an L on that day.
So Manchin is now, I mean, they're seemingly restarting negotiations. Manchin's initial counterproposal was basically everything except the child tax credit, the ACA expansion, the climate provisions, the universal pre-K provision, and all of that stuff. But the child tax credit is really the only, and again, it's just like a 1-year extension of it, or the different year figures are changing day by day. But that's the thing that approaches the most structural change in Build Back Better, exactly, and that's why he's opposing it. And it puts more money in the hands of people who need it desperately. And it also provides them with more economic power, and you can't have that.
That's the thing, is like with the Biden administration and all the spending that they did, guess what? The Republicans spent a lot of money during COVID too. It's good that we stopped this, but the structural stuff was always what to watch. And it's been completely given short shrift or disdained by the party leadership. The $15 minimum wage, absolutely no discussion of any sort of healthcare expansion. Like all this stuff is just gone, and now we're going to do investigation over Jan 6th. And like, look, I think we should be doing that after we passed like a $7 trillion infrastructure bill. But we're not going to do that. We're instead going to rely on that for turn out the midterms. And good luck for the Democrats, because I think they are going to catch a lot of losses.
Oh, yeah.